My name is Ryan Kof. I am the campus pastor at Leo and the youth pastor there as well. So in light of that, I thought I should tell you that I am wearing what I am now calling the ministry mullet. This is a t-shirt underneath here. So business on the top, t-shirt underneath, ministry mullet for you, so I can go be a youth pastor after I'm done with this again. It is a joy to be with you and to speak about evangelism. If I'm just honest with you, if I could just be transparent for a minute, knowing that Jeremy and Brad and Troy were the ones speaking with you, man, they have great wisdom and truth to share and great experience. They are people that I look up to as good models for witnessing as a lifestyle with intentionality. So excited that you got a chance to hear from them. Tonight, though, I'm going to slice this cookie in a slightly different way. I don't know why you slice cookies, but I'm going to slice it differently. And what I would like to do is a rip-off from a book called Confident Faith by Mark Mittelberg. And so tonight you're going to get a teaser, whet your appetite, hopefully, and you'll go buy the book. And I got to deal with Mark laid out that when I sell 1,000 copies, he's going to give me a new car. So I totally made that up. But hopefully whet your appetite to do that. But what I want to do is kind of look at this with how do we evangelize? How does someone actually arrive at faith? And that's the question he asks. People come to believe a faith or not a faith at all in different means or paths. So he has a section of the book called Paths to Faith. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. There's 6 of them. Now, let me tell you how this works, right? And why it's important for evangelism. 2 reasons why Paths to Faith is important for evangelism. 1, so you can personally recognize, why do I believe what I believe? And that's a good question for us to ask and consider. And secondly, it should shape the way you might share and interact with other people. So if you're interacting with someone who is Muslim, they typically believe in their faith through an authoritarian path. They have their imam, their family, their religious leader saying, you need to believe this, you must believe this. This is true, you need to accept this. Don't question our authority. And so you're going to speak to them about Jesus and the gospel in a way that's very different from a Wiccan who believes in their religion because they believe they've cast a spell or can talk to a spirit. And so it's a mystical experience. So when you start understanding where people are coming from and how they're holding on to their faith, then you are more equipped to speak to them in a way that might resonate with them. So in light of this, what I'm going to ask you to do is if you turn in your awesome notebook thingy to page 22, at the very back there's an appendix there. And this has a chance to be awkward or awesome. It's totally up to you. No, because what we're going to do is we're going to take the next 10 minutes or so and just go through this faith path questionnaire. So what this is designed to do is you just give your gut response. Don't overthink it. You just need to be quick about it. 1 to 5, how strongly does this resonate with you? How much does this describe you? And you're just going to answer those questions. There's 42 of them. That'll go quick, hopefully, if you know how to read. And then when you get to the back of that, you just total them up, and it should help you understand what pathway you're following to your faith. And if we do this on the front end, then you'll have a little bit of context as we talk about it and see where you land. So we're going to put a little bit of music on, and I'm going to sit down again for a few minutes and then just fill this out, total that up, and then when it's appropriately awkward, I'll come back up and we'll keep going. I just want to reiterate again, the idea with this is to make pathways to good conversation. And in action, to learn how to interact with people individually and differently because they're unique, because they're valued. And like this tool, like many others when it comes to faith or apologetics, this kind of falls into the more apologetics side of this conversation. I think about it like a football game. Apologetics plays both offense and defense. Apologetics strengthens our faith. Faith helps you to understand how you're approaching it, helps you to be strong, but it's also a way to move the ball forward. And it's also a way to help break down walls in people's life, and so, and to bring them to a spot where they can take that step of faith. So it's fun. I'm excited about it. So we're going to keep it real simple tonight. Like I said, it's going to be a quick overview, brush strokes. Big brush strokes, quick overview, and we're just going to walk through the same format. So the first path is the relative path. Truth is whatever is right for you or works for you. And we see this a lot. I think this is no surprise to people. But if you're looking at the celebrity culture right now, Oprah gave a speech during the Golden Globes this year that used the phrase, your truth, a lot. You have to speak your truth. Don't be afraid to stand up and speak your truth. And while she's saying that to encourage people that feel victimized and oppressed to not be enslaved by that anymore, but what she's really doing is setting up this relativistic truth. It's not the truth, it's your truth. So we live in a culture that is increasingly relativistic, that says truth is whatever works for you. You have your truth, I have mine. Anybody ever hear that before from somebody? I know that I have, and I found it fascinating. You have your truth, Ryan, that works for you. It's not going to work for me. So relative path really calls into question what the nature of truth is. Is there objective truth? Truth that is true all the time, no matter our opinion, or is truth relative and subject to our opinion? That's kind of what it is. Now, is there strengths to a relativistic approach to faith? Really not, really, to be honest. This is the weakest one of them all. To give it some type of strength, the redeeming quality is it's based on what works for them. And we can say, as Troy pointed out, that the Christian faith is one that works. Right? The Christian faith, real faith in a divine God, should have an impact on life. It should address the needs that we have. It should answer the tough questions. There's power in Christ and in believing Him and being a part of His church and being filled with the Spirit. So it's based on what works. The danger with relativism, though, in the relativistic approach to faith, there's the logic problem, which is we live our entire lives based upon objective truths. And we're glad that we do so, right? Until it comes to matters of faith, because making something invisible suddenly makes it less objectively true. We all believe in gravity even though we don't see it. Gravity is objective fact. It doesn't matter how much you greatly desire to be able to have a 40-inch vertical. Your desire doesn't equate to reality. You can't defy the laws of gravity just because you desire it. It's invisible, but it still is objective. Yet, when it comes to matters of faith, we are suddenly okay being subjective in what we do. The second logic flaw is it's a truth that speaks authoritatively about truth while at the same time saying everybody's truth matters. For instance, your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, except my truth is true for everybody. That make sense? Well, I say, well, no, my truth says my truth is good for everybody. There's an objective claim that Jesus lived, died, and rose again. And you say, well, that works for you, but it doesn't work for me. And my truth is the one truth that actually is true for everybody in every opinion. Does that logic make sense? Melissa's like, no. See me later. I'll try it again for you. The third danger when it comes to a relativistic faith is that if it's based on what works, what happens when Christianity or your faith, being a Hindu or Buddhist or Muslim, doesn't work the way that you expect it to? Let me speak to you as Christians. What happens when you go through a season where what you think Christianity ought to be and the fruit it ought to bring into your life isn't there? Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? In those moments, you feel like this isn't working because there's despair and challenge. So how do you respond to somebody who believes in faith in a relativistic way? And I've had this, right? I'll share my faith with my friend, and he's like, hey, I'm glad that works for you, but it doesn't work for me. Man, it's a tough one. My encouragement to you is that I think we need to let them know that, hey, we tolerate you, but that doesn't mean everybody's beliefs are true. You know, we live in a society where tolerance means everything has to be equal and true, and we can say, no, that I can love you and we can have a relationship, but it doesn't mean your perspective is just as true as my perspective, or your truth is truth and my truth is truth. There is right and wrong. There is a difference. There is a time when A does not equal B, but we can still love you in the midst of that. If you're trying to share your faith and they keep going back to this relativistic idea, well, that's your truth, and all religions say the same thing. All religions are equal. We hear that a lot too, right? All just lead to God. Do a little research. There's a couple funny examples of, you can ask people, do you really think that they got it right? Did you know there is a mushroom cult? And I'm not talking about hippies. I'm talking about, sorry, that was a joke. Thank you for the, you got mushroom cult, hippies, I don't know, right? I was born in 85, so maybe I got it wrong. But they thought Jesus was a highly evolved mushroom. Like that, there's a legitimate group that says Jesus is a highly evolved mushroom. You can do you agree with that or not? Do you think they got it right? Is that a relative truth claim? Or what about Heaven's Gate UFO group? They thought, you know what, that there's an asteroid coming, the aliens are coming behind it, so our truth says aliens are going to come take us up into the sky, so the appropriate response is to poison ourselves and die. And they did. They died by self-poisoning because they thought UFOs were going to take them. And you can say, man, do you really think they got it right? Like, come on, you can agree with me that that is obviously insane behavior. Not all paths are equally true. And just because something works doesn't make it right. So have conversation with your relativistic friends and neighbors and say, man, just because something works doesn't make it right. It might scratch the itch you think it's scratching, but it doesn't mean it's a right and true thing. You know, I could go rob a bank right now and get away with it. And it would work, right? I'd walk away with lots of money if I got away with it. But it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right. My first exhortation to you out of this one is to be a lover of truth. This will be a thread that will come back up at the end as we get to the evidential path. But I think that we have an incredible opportunity as the church to be champions of reason and logic and thoughtfulness. And that seems kind of silly when the culture would classify the Christians as those who are out of touch with reality and make incredible extreme leaps of faith and don't believe in anything that's reasonable. And we can say, hold up. When it comes to religious beliefs, many people today who believe in this relativistic path are setting aside basics of reason and logic and evidence to make truth claims that are just truly unbelievable if you consider them reasonably. Second path, we'll go a little bit faster. I want to spend some time on relativism. Second path is the traditional path. Truth is what you've always been taught is right. And this is the most common approach, right, that people have to faith. Have you ever questioned yourself, saying like, man, if I didn't grow up in a Christian household, I don't know if I'd be a Christian. Or if I didn't grow up in a nation that was dominated by Christians, or in a town that was dominated by Christians, I don't know if I'd be a Christian. Have you ever wondered that? Anybody else besides me? Thank you. One person. Thank you. Two. I see you, brothers. I see you. No, we can question that, right? Because really, it's the most common way that we come to belief, that we choose belief, but it's not really a choice at all. We just passively accept what was given to us, and that's dangerous, if I'm just honest with you. See, the strengths and weaknesses go hand in hand with this one. The strengths of tradition is that there are positive traditions. You know, I'm trying to teach my kids that every night before you go to bed, you brush your teeth. Like, that's a good tradition. I hope they remember that, like, and do that, so they have teeth when they're 35. There's neutral traditions that say, this is how we broom the floor at the Cove House. I don't brush the floor. That's not what I do. But broom the floor at the Cove House. You know, that's a tradition that's neutral. It's not positive or negative. It just is. But there's also negative traditions, right? Generational sin. Patterns of behavior you learn from your parents, bias and bigotry, prejudice, false belief about God. So it's imperative for us to not just accept what's gone before us. You know, some of us need to get our inner teenager back on and question everything. See, the logic behind this says this. If you believe in Christianity because that's what your parents did and your grandparents did and your great-grandparents did, well, why did your great-grandpa come to Christ in the first place? Do you think he sat down and did a lot of evidence-based research and thoughtfulness and prayerfully considered and evaluated other religions and then decided that, no, Christianity is the most reasonable faith out there? Or did they go to church because there was a cute young lady he wanted to be, to hook up with, and so he came to church for those reasons? Like, you don't know. You just don't know. So you need to question the tradition. And I think it's important for us to question other people's traditions then. You know, ask the questions about their faith. Help them to see that, man, if you believe this simply because you've always been taught this, you don't be mindless. Feel free to be thoughtful. Encourage them that Scripture says in 1 Thessalonians 5:21 that we are to test everything and to hold on to what is good. That God doesn't want you to be mindless and set your thoughts aside, but he wants you to think through and choose your faith, not just blindly accept it. You know, I'm a youth pastor, right? Ministry mullet, t-shirt underneath here. And I have no problem telling a high school student to go evaluate other faiths. You know, high school is a time when some students are really asking the question, is this what I believe because my parents tell me or because I choose? So go examine other faiths. This is the beauty of the Western cultures, that we can be in an atmosphere and in a situation where we can rub shoulders with people of all different faiths. We can get to know other faiths by reading their writings on the internet and meeting up with people. And if you evaluate other faiths and interact with them in this kind of free market of religion, I am confident that Christianity will come up on top because it's true and it makes sense and it's based on good evidence. And I want to be a follower of truth, not just a follower of Christianity. So go evaluate, examine your faith. You'll see that it's good. So encourage them to do that. And if you enter along with somebody and say, let's journey together and evaluate faith together, I think that's a really cool thing. I'll research your religion as well. You can help somebody who's in a traditional path by partnering along with them and evaluating together, both questioning together your own faiths. The next step is the authoritarian path. Truth is what you've been told that you must believe. Now, where the traditional path is a habit and it's passive, the authoritarian path is about submission and it's passive. You know, I follow Christianity because it's my tradition, or I follow Christianity because I'm told I must. And this really comes out in the Muslim faith. If there's one faith that really is strong on this, especially in the Middle East and outside of America, it's the Muslim faith. The word Muslim actually means, or Islam actually means submission. And how this shows is you must believe because your imam tells you believe. You must believe because your family tells you must believe. And if you question a Muslim, it ultimately boils down to their opinion about Jesus versus our opinion about Jesus. And then you get to this really interesting bit of logic that the Muslim can look at you and say, I believe what Muhammad said about Jesus, even though Muhammad wrote 600 years after the life of Jesus in a cave. And they're going to accept his word because he's the authority over the eyewitness testimonies from the people that we have, the New Testament writers that are writing within a lifetime of Jesus, from the non-Christian ancient sources that write at the time of Jesus and the times of those right after Jesus, the next 20, 30, 40 years after Jesus. There are non-Christian authors that write about Christianity and tell some really interesting things about it, that tell you factual bits that are key. And so they believe because their authority tells them they must believe, even if the evidence is contradictory to it. Mormons have the same thing. They'll believe what Joseph Smith says about Jesus, even though Joseph Smith wrote 1,500 years later, sitting in a tent and getting words from an angel. So what authority are you believing in? So what's the strength of the authoritarian path? The authoritarian path is good in a sense because God does establish authority. You know, Romans 13, governmental authority. Titus, other passages, elder authority in a church. God establishes authority for a reason, to shelter, to protect, to guide, to lead. The danger, though, is that you are following a poor authority. And that the danger is when authority shuts down the ability to explore and examine and question. I had a friend who is a Wiccan. Research it if you don't know much about it. It's a mystical, earth-based religion, cast spells. And so hey, can we talk about faith? I know you've been friends for a long time. Like, I want to hear more about it. And so we talked a little bit. Hey, would you want to come to church with me sometime? Like, and just hear more? He said, well, I have to ask my Coven leader if I can go to church. Well, you're a grown man. Like, you know, you're 18, 19 years old. You have to ask somebody for permission to go to church? Because the person in charge of this religious group has control over your exploration, your questioning. So how do you respond to somebody who believes in something because of authority? I don't have all the answers, but I think part of it is helping them to understand that, yes, everybody will be underneath authority, but what kind of authority are you under? Don't be afraid to just ask basic questions about the authority in your life. Test them. Don't just follow leaders blindly. That works for us as Christians and for them. We can enter in again with this and say we want to have the same approach to faith. And so to see if your leaders have integrity. How do you question your leaders? Well, see if they have integrity. Are they examples of the teaching or exceptions to the teaching? All right, Matthew 7:15 illustrates this. Are they consistent? Do they live out their faith consistently over the long haul? King David had some pretty big blunders in his faith, but he was consistent in the long haul with following the teachings that the teachings of God, the teachings that he represented and led people in. And are they accurate to the world, to their own teaching, to God? 1 Timothy 4. And finally, question your leaders is say, are they open enough so that you can evaluate their life? Are they living Are they living with enough transparency so you can see if they have integrity, consistency, or accuracy? Or are they so cloistered in a way that you don't really know them and can't ask those questions of them? So I would encourage you, if you have a friend who believes because of the authoritative path, encourage them to question and question alongside of them. The next two are kind of fun. This is the intuitive path. This one is pretty cool. It's about the intuition, right? Don't just trust your feelings, don't just trust your eyes, trust your gut, trust your feelings. It's an idea that is prevalent. In like every kids movie, I have a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 7-month-old. So we watch a lot of kids movies. We watch Disney a fair amount. And I tell you what, every kids movie and every Disney show has this wonderful lie embedded in it, which is follow your heart. Right? Follow what your heart tells you to do. Even if you would disobey all the authorities and parents and do foolish things, just follow your heart and everything will turn out fine. And I see that language and the idea even creeping into the church. And while that's just really Buddhist thinking, just to be honest. It's Eastern thought coming in. That's what the intuitive path is. Follow your heart or your gut. Now, there are some strengths to this, right? That God made us remarkably intuitive creatures. That there is something about a gut instinct sometime that it raises a flag and worth examining. And there are times and examples of people avoiding massive dangers or stepping into wonderful truth because they followed a gut instinct on something. God did place a moral intuition inside of us. A gut feeling, a moral compass, this heart sense that something is right or wrong, and that points us back to God ultimately. But the danger is we forget what God tells us about our hearts, right? In Jeremiah 17:9, that the heart is deceitful above all else and is desperately wicked. That our heart is deceitful above all else and desperately wicked. Jeremiah 17:9. The danger to the intuitive path, if you're following Christ because of your intuition and gut, that can be a dangerous spot to be at because you put your trust in a heart that is deceptively wicked. And if you're talking to somebody who's following their heart, how do you talk to them? How do you live a life with them where you say it's not just about following your heart? I think you can say to them, I think that's really great to have a good sense of intuition and a compass, and we agree that it's a yellow light saying, warning, look out, examine further, but don't stop there, because God made you not only with a heart, but a mind in reason and logic, and evaluate and examine. Don't just follow your gut. You have more to bring to the table than that. Remind them that some of the worst people in society have followed their gut and followed their heart. And it's led to mass destruction and death and chaos. I can tell you, Hitler was probably following his heart. Follow your heart can be a really dangerous thing. Help them to see that. Encourage them to be more. The second to last one we're going to talk about is the mystical path. Where the intuitive is this mystical gut feeling, something internal that points you to a faith. The mystical path is an external. Something divine happens that gives you a sense of faith. You see this in the Book of Mormon. When people come to preach that, they say, hey, sit down, read the Book of Mormon, and ask God to tell you if it's true, and he will put a burning in your bosom, is the old language, of fire in your chest. You'll have this mystical experience that says God is true. And many people come to belief because they read the Book of Mormon and they have this mystical experience and think, this must be true because I had this experience. Again, back to my Wiccan friend, I'm talking to him and he's telling me with all sincerity that he sees a spirit in the room right now and that he's interacting with him. He tells me with all sincerity that he was able to cast a spell and set a picture on fire with just touching it. I mean, how do you interact with people that have these incredible mystical experiences? I think there's Mark Mittelberg suggests two simple bits of truth to help us interact, to help us to know and place mystical experience in our context, in our life, and to interact with others. He says that feelings doesn't mean it's real. Feel doesn't equal real. The first bit of truth is feel doesn't equal real. You might have a sense or a feeling or have this mystical experience. It doesn't mean something mystical or true actually happened. 1 Thessalonians 5:21 says we should test our feelings. Galatians 1:8-9, Paul says to the church that he's writing to, said, if I preach to you another gospel other than Jesus, or if an angel comes down and proclaims to you another gospel other than the one that we presented to you earlier about Jesus, then they should be eternally condemned. It doesn't matter if you have this mystical angelic experience coming to say you should believe something. If it's not based upon the truth, the historical reality of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, then we need to set that aside. Feeling something doesn't make it real. And the second little claim is that real doesn't equal good. Real doesn't equal good. You know, I don't know what your views are on spiritual warfare and power. You know, we don't want to get overly focused on that to some degree, right? But the reality is that stuff is there and it happens. Scripture teaches us and our experience confirms that there are powers that be in our world. You can have mystical experiences that are from Satan, that are to lead you astray. And there are many today in many religions across the world who have wonderful mystical experiences, but they're on the road to hell. And we need to learn how to talk to them and encourage them about that. And say just because it's real doesn't mean it's good. Those are the dangers. Now the strength is that we have a living and true God. Like that's a good thing about a mystical faith, right? You understand and know that God is living and active and powerful and interacts with us and interacts in our world. That's a beautiful thing. But we need to respond to mystical stuff by evaluating it. Is the source true and good? Can I take this a step farther? I've had this experience, but what does this experience mean? Where's this experience coming from? Does this experience hold up to reality? The last one, what we're trying to move you to, and we're going to end with this, is an evidential faith. So if you put evidential faith down, congratulations on your little survey. You got a gold star. You're already there. Congratulations. Bonus points for you. Now, the goal here is we want to move in our faith to a spot where we're based on evidence. Now, none of these other things are necessarily evil and wrong. Like you can have, and you ought to have, like I hope you have a mystical experience. I hope you see God working in your life. Like that's a good thing, right? Those aren't bad things. But ultimately, what's the foundation, the bedrock of our faith? The goal is that it would be evidential. And this is where the church is really, has, like I said earlier, has a really great opportunity to speak into a world in our culture. Because in a world that says we prize logic and reason and science, we have an awfully good habit of setting aside reasonable, logical thinking and making our faith decisions based upon things that have nothing to do with evidence, truth, accuracy, reason. And Christianity is totally different. So I just want to remind you and just put a plug in. At some point, I would encourage you to go look up what ancient authors say about the church, about Christianity, about Jesus. You can pull up within about 100 years of Jesus' death. So by about 130 AD, you can pull up several sources of people that aren't Christian, that are a lot of times anti-Christianity, and they will tell you some very interesting things about Jesus. They will tell you that Jesus was a historical person, that there was a man named Jesus. Boom. Jesus isn't a made-up person. Jesus is a real historical person. That he was crucified under Pontius Pilate. Non-Christians affirm that fact. And so he died. Boom. Another fact set in stone by historical non-Christian authors. And that for a while, the church and those followers of Jesus were silent. But then something happened. And these people started worshiping as divine this guy who was crucified and proclaiming that he came back to life and started doing all sorts of work. And they started taking over the empire and causing problems. And you have to ask yourself, wait, why do non-Christians say these things? Why would these disciples go from people that hid in fear when Jesus died to go out there and changing the world and proclaiming his death and resurrection when, as church tradition holds, virtually every one of the 12 disciples is killed because of their faith? Evidence, base, reason. The copies of Scripture that we have are wonderfully accurate and wonderfully old. It's beautiful. Now, there is a danger to the evidential faith, and I just want to point this out, right? That the danger to an evidence-based faith is that you become cerebral and academic and dry and stale, and it's only something that's up here and not something that's in here. So I want to encourage you, yes, we want to be cerebral. We want to think through and use the gifts that God has given us. But don't let it be just a head thing. Let it be something that's a passion in your gut, a burning in your belly. Say, this is something that's vibrant and real and true and good, and I will live my life in response to that. The strength of it is based on historical fact. As we wrap up tonight, I guess, big picture again, the point of this is to whet your appetite. Hopefully I did it justice enough that you're curious. I would highly encourage you to get his book and read it. You get some good examples, illustration, breathe some life into it. And the 6 paths of faith is the first part of the book. The last part swings in a different direction. It has some really good evidence and proofs and arrows pointing to God. So it'll strengthen your faith and help you share with others. But once again, I want to encourage you that we believe in Christ because he is a historically real person who lived, who died, and who rose again. Paul, the scripture writers actually say if Jesus wasn't who he said he was, if Jesus never rose from the dead, we should be pitied among all men because we've given our lives away for something that's false. So we have truth. We have historical reality on our side, and we have an incredible chance to share that and to be voices of reason and truth in people's lives. And I think they want that and value that. I think young people are increasingly seeing the folly of pursuing faith and religion in ways that aren't, that are mystical, that are based just upon tradition. They're questioning. They want to know truth. They want a firm place to stand. We can give them that.